Welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival Lives Online Conversation 2021 Festival Edition. Please join me, Kelly Devine, the Artistic Director, and Nina Strike, the Executive Director, in conversation with David Levine behind the film Finding Howard, which you can see as a part of our festival, both in our in-person screenings, which start September 21st through September 26th at the Winter Park Library, and following in our virtual screening opportunity beginning September 27th and running through October 3rd. You can find out all the details, scheduling, ticketing, and other events by going to peacefilmfest.org. And now, please join us in welcoming David Levine. Hello, David. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's lovely to have you with us today, David. And so let's start out by talking about the film and tell us a little bit about Finding Howard.
Finding Howard tells the story of a song called Howard Gray. It's a true story, and it was written by a Nashville songwriter named Lee Doman, who one evening had a memory show up unexpectedly of an event that took place in his life many years earlier when he was a 7th grade student. And it was a memory about a boy named Howard who was ridiculed, harassed, and bullied by others, and how Lee stood by and didn't do anything about it, even though he wanted to. He couldn't find a way to intervene. And he never forgot that moment. And he never forgot about Howard and the experiences that he had for many years when he was a student. So Lee wrote this song and recorded it. And then one day I heard the song. I was teaching 6th grade, and I heard the song and it made me cry. It reminded me of so many memories from when I was growing up, not about standing by, but just being around the social dynamics of children and how if someone's different in some way, they often become a target. And how as a teacher, I saw this happen in schools every day. So I was very moved to learn the song. I was a teacher, but I'm also a musician. And the music that I was raised on is folk music, which teaches lessons, which looks at social activism as a way to unify around stories of humans, all of whom need to be connected. And I felt this was a great opportunity to take this song, learn it, and begin my own folk process of creating community, connection, and empathy within my classroom. And the story of this movie tells how that song, me learning it, and the experiences that I've had for many, many years have helped to create a movement in schools where we promote compassion, empathy, and belonging.
Well, David, you mentioned that you're a teacher and that you're a musician, but how did you come about deciding that this should be a film? And can you tell us a little bit about what you learned as a function of that process?
Mm-hmm. The song has always created an immediate connection for the listener. And I don't only sing it for children, I sing it for adults, for other educators, for parents, for community members. And in 3 minutes and 20 seconds, which is how long it takes to sing the song, it opens up a pathway of self-discovery, self-reflection, and longing to make things better for other people, especially children. And I always felt the power of that song. And so through the years, I got to know Lee Doman, the songwriter, because students would often write Lee letters. That was part of our lesson. They also would write letters to Howard. And 20 years after Lee wrote the song, he actually found Howard Gray. You know, the lyric in the song, the ending says, "We'll probably never meet again. All I can do is pray. May you and God forgive us, Howard Gray." And after he wrote that song and it was played and recorded, one evening, Lee's parents reached out to him and said that they'd found Howard. So Lee reached out to Howard. He sang the song for him. He actually recorded it, and Howard called Lee up on the phone and they both cried when they connected. And so I got to know Howard a little bit because students wrote letters to him as well. And in 2016, one morning, Lee called me up and told me that Howard had passed away the night before. And in that moment, I felt very strongly that I wanted to make Howard's story, how it touched so many children across the world, make that story his legacy. Because Lee actually told me once, Howard actually told me once, if my story can help children, then it was worth it. And that's what I wanted to maintain, that message, Lee's message, Howard's message, that we're all in this together. And I wanted that to be the legacy. And that's what inspired me to create the film.
For anyone who sees this film, I find it hard to imagine that anyone who sees this film wouldn't be touched by the story, particularly Howard's capacity for forgiveness. And I think that's something that is difficult sometimes to capture, because it can either feel, it can feel a lot of ways in which people want to push away from it, but you manage to capture it in a way that embraces you. And I wonder if you can talk about how you approached it.
I just worked off of the dynamics or the magic that happens when people hear that song, because it tells a universal story. The title really is the answer to the question, because it's a challenge to find Howard, not so much in our schools or our classrooms, but to find the Howard inside each of us. Each of us wants to belong. It's actually not only a need, but it's a right to be accepted and honored for who we are. And what stops people from embracing others is fear. And I think what stops people from going within is the fear of what they're going to find there, that vulnerability. And so Howard Gray is an invitation. Finding Howard is an invitation to finding the Howard that lives within each of us. We all have beating hearts, and life is so hectic and can be very stressful. And it's important to slow everything down, start within, tap into our beating heart, have empathy for ourselves as a pathway to having empathy for others, as a pathway to listening to all those beating hearts around us.
The mission of the Global Peace Film Festival is to find these models that people can take into their own personal lives, into their communities. And what's so special about your film is that not only do you have the emotional inspiration through the song and through the telling of the story, making sure that Howard's voice is heard, but you also, and you alluded to it in one of your earlier answers, there's also an exercise that the children undertake where they write letters. And I wonder if you could talk about that as a kind of effective tool to help people develop that empathy.
Mm-hmm. You know, the idea of empathy, and I'm the director of the Teaching Empathy Institute, and that's the institute that created this film. The idea of teaching empathy as more than just a feeling, but as an intention, grew out of the work with children who heard the song Howard Gray. So often when I would sing that song, kids, once they knew it was a true story, it was a story that wasn't written, it was a song that wasn't written to teach a lesson, but written to tell a story that was real, that was true. Once they knew it was true, they still do this, they want to talk about it. They want to understand, why did Lee do this to Howard? Why didn't he help them? Why did those kids treat Howard that way? They had all of these questions, all this wonder. And so I wanted to tap into that wonder, and I started to invite children to write letters to Howard and to Lee. And by writing those letters, they put themselves in their feelings, in their lives. They became empathic. They were imagining what each of them were feeling, what each of them were needing. And those letters were part of a curriculum that I created. And those letters were sent to me, and I made copies of every single one. And for many years, I had a big box in my office, and I carried around wherever I went. Whenever I'd move, I'd always have that box. Letters from children from 4 years old, they would draw pictures, to seniors in high school, where they would invite Howard to speak at their high school graduation because they heard the song in 6th grade. a whole range of emotions were expressed. And I kept those letters. And when we decided to make the film, we looked through every one of those letters and chose 10 of them as our first round of selections. We wanted to have children's voices because that's what this song is about. Let's listen to the voices of those children. And we listened to them through some of the letters that are read throughout the film.
It is a beautiful exercise that I think we would all benefit from trying. And so that's why I felt that this film would be so impactful for our audience, that it would not only present that inspirational story, but also give people something to do afterwards that might help them channel their own feelings and to practice. You said it's an intention. It needs to be something that we practice all the time, not just something that we say rhetorically.
You know, the essence of empathy is focused listening. Howard Gray tells one story, but each of us has a story. And when we're with one another, we don't know what chapters have come before. We're writing today's page together. And we can create connection, we can create healing, which is really about being whole for anyone today in that moment. And that's the opportunity that empathic action creates.
Well said, well said. And Nina.
So how can our audiences support this work, first of all? And also, what are you doing now? What's next for you? And how can we follow that?
I think the first step is when you experience this film, and it is an experience. It's an interactive experience because it brings up emotional memories. And the first thing people can do when they're experiencing this film is to go within and get in touch with what they're feeling. And many adults who've heard the song and who've seen the film, they look back with regret. What could I have done differently? And I encourage the viewer not to regret, but to see this as an opportunity to look ahead. I always say to children, we do the best we can in that moment with what we know. And this story opens us up to understanding our own life experiences, to find that Howard inside each of us. So that's the first step, to honor your own feelings and your own story. And then see this as really a call to action. What can we do to create the conditions in our schools and in our communities where children feel embraced, celebrated, honored for who they are, where they feel that sense of belonging and affiliation? And that's really what I hope happens with this film as a first step. What can we do for each other? What conditions can we create in our schools, classrooms, and communities? And then my hope with our Institute is for people then to tap into the resources that we've created. I say in the film, with the singing the song and how people began to invite me into their classrooms to sing it in the early days. I didn't make a plan. The plan made the experience and invited me into it. The song and the story have become a muse. It whispers in my ear, do the right thing, follow your heart. And I invite people to follow their own hearts. The muse is how they feel when they experience the film, when they watch it. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What memories come up? Make that your muse, and then look ahead. Follow the path of your heart, the direction takes you. Follow that, trust that. And then we provide the materials that are digital or in print form, and some are podcasts to help ground people in specific practices that they can bring into their work with children, with each other, even into their homes with their children.
Well, that's wonderful, David. Thank you so much for sharing this background regarding Finding Howard and the journey that it has taken you on. And thank you for the for the generosity of your spirit in terms of sharing this journey with our audience today. And for those of you listening, again, if you'd like to learn more about the tools that David was referring to, please check out findinghoward.org for more information. And if you want to see the film as a part of the Global Peace Film Festival, remember that it will be a part of our in-person screenings, which begin September 21st, running through the 26th. And then as a part of our streaming week, beginning September 27th through October 3rd, all of the information and details is available on peacefilmfest.org. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you at the next Glow.